Welcome back to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, a window into the soul of the North Fork of Long Island. We'll delve into the pulse of our community, its pressing issues, promising opportunities, and the rich stories that weave our shared history. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 81, we sit down with Suffolk County Sheriff Errol Toulon Jr. to delve into his rich ancestry and his childhood experiences growing up in the Bronx. We explore the influences that shaped his life, his family's history in law enforcement, and his journey through education that led him to a career at Rikers Island within the Corrections Department. Sheriff Toulon opens up about the personal challenges he has faced, including health battles, and how he has persevered through adversity. We also discuss his decision to run for Suffolk County Sheriff, his victory in 2017, and the significant issues he has tackled since taking office, from gang activity and opioid use to bail reform and the welfare of incarcerated individuals. The conversation further addresses the unprecedented challenges posed by COVID-19, the social unrest of 2020, and how society and law enforcement can work together moving forward. Finally, Sheriff Toulon shares his ongoing initiatives within the department and his vision for enhancing the safety of Suffolk County. So I hope you enjoy episode 81 with Sheriff Errol Toulon Jr. This episode was recorded July 12th, 2024. Thank you so much for coming on to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today. It's really a pleasure to have you on today.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
So to start off, can you share a brief introduction about yourself, where you were born and raised?
Sure. I was born and raised in the South Bronx. I attended Cardinal Hayes High School growing up. I then went on, and I should say one of my claims to fame was I was a bat boy for the New York Yankees for 2 years while I was in high school. And so growing up in the South Bronx was challenging back then because it was the late 70s, early 80s. But my parents provided a great home, a stable home life, and also ensured that my brother and I had a great education.
Mm. And in terms of your ancestry, how far back can you go on both of your parents' side?
On my dad's side, I can go back as far as the early 1700s for my great-grandfather. I was born in France.
Wow.
And migrated to the island of Dominica eventually. He had 2 aunts there that were in the clothing business, and their health was failing. So he went to the island of Dominica. But David Toulon is his name, and that's as far back as I can trace. On my mom's side, cannot go any further than her mom and dad, my grandparents. So my grandfather served in World War II, and my grandmother worked in the public school system in New York City.
Mm. And on your dad's side, how did they come to the U.S.?
If I remember the story correctly, my great-grandfather had my grandfather. He was born in the island of Dominica and then eventually came over to the States. So that's how we wound up here. He wound up meeting my grandmother, my father's mother. They got married and had 2 sons. Tragically, my father's mother passed away when he was 3. So he never really got a chance to know her well.
Mm-hmm. And did you get to meet any of your grandparents?
Yes, I met 3 of the 4. As I said, my father's mother passed away when he was 3. Mm-hmm. My grandfather did remarry, so I did know my grandfather, my step-grandmother, and then my grandparents on my mom's side.
Mm. And in terms of your parents, how did they meet?
So my dad worked in a grocery store in the Bronx, and my mother went shopping for her mom. Well, my mother was the second child of six, and so she went grocery shopping for the family and saw my dad, and I guess he saw her, and the rest is history. They've been married 63 years in October, but they were dating for about 3 or 4 years before then, so they've been together almost 70 years.
Wow. And did they grow up in the Bronx?
Yes, they grew up in the Bronx. My father attended Morris High School. He was actually 2 years behind General Colin Powell.
Mm.
And my mother attended Cathedral High School in downtown Manhattan. One of the things I give my mom credit for, she really wanted to go to this school. And as I said, she was one of six. And in order for her to go to the school, she had to get 2 jobs to pay for her high school back then. So something she was determined to do. I often say I get my determination from my mother.
And did they ever tell you what it was like for them growing up in that area?
You know, there were some challenges, but never anything too difficult, anything that wouldn't occur in a changing time. So, you know, whether it was peer pressure or their own ambitions on what they wanted to do in life was really, you know, what they discussed.
Mm-hmm. And so what did your father end up doing for work?
Oh, my dad was a warden on Rikers Island. He worked there for 36 years. My mother worked over 30 years for the New York City Board of Education. She was a school secretary. So I think that pretty much grounded my brother and I growing up. And I think one of the unique things is that my father went back to school. He's an adult learner and became adult learner and was got 2 master's degrees. And then my mom went back to school and got her bachelor's degree. So we watched them do that, work, and raise a family.
Mm. And would your father describe how it was at work on Rikers Island?
He wouldn't often come home and talk about work. Sometimes we would go to work. He would go to work in his uniform, and you know, that was probably the first time when I saw him. I asked him what he did for a living, and he told me he was a New York City correction officer, and I asked him what that entailed, and he said that they rehabilitate men and women who are in jail. Mm. So it was my first understanding of what he did and what New York City Corrections was about.
And did you say you had a brother?
Yes, I have a brother.
You have a brother.
Yes.
So how was it for you growing up in the Bronx as a child, and how would you describe the neighborhood and atmosphere?
So my parents, we had moved in the early 70s to a co-op, which is a much better environment, and also is ironically within walking distance of our grammar school. We went to a parochial grammar school and Catholic high school. So it was really a secure environment, and I think the strictness of our household and then the strictness of school between parochial grammar school and then all-boys Catholic high school really kept my brother and I in check. You know, we did not really hang out much, except unless it was to play baseball, softball, or basketball, and then the occasional touch football games, you know, competing neighborhoods. But our parents kept us pretty busy, and if we weren't busy, we were in the household staying busy. Mm.
So you weren't as much outside, like in the neighborhood, as much playing on the streets as much?
No, I mean, you know, my dad was a firm believer in discipline, so you know, by 7 o'clock we were in the house and was not a minute late. Otherwise we suffer the wrath of the warden, as I would often say. But, you know, my parents wanted us to make sure that we studied hard, you know, did our homework, and, you know, focused more on school and other things.
Mm-hmm. And so did you go to Catholic school all through elementary, middle school, and
yes, so
high school?
Except for my first year, first 2 years, I went to public school, and they wanted to skip me from 3rd to 4th, but my younger brother, who's 2 years younger, was entering grammar school, and so my parents put us both in Catholic grammar school, and then we both went on to Catholic high school.
And how was overall your schooling experience? What would you say you were interested in through even middle school or high school in terms of subject or core classes?
I would say my best classes were probably mathematics, um, accounting, but accounting we took in our third and fourth year. It wasn't, a 4-year requirement. English, we had to do well. There were some classes that, and I often tell a lot of people I was an average student in high school. Even though I have a doctorate now, that revelation came later in life. But I tried my best because my parents paid for my education, and money did not come easy. They were both civil servants, so it was they worked hard, and they went back to school, and they expected, my brother and I. My brother always did very well in school. I was pretty much an average student.
Mm. And also in high school, did you have any role models or teachers that you could think of through high school or were you thinking coming out of high school what you knew what you wanted to do?
I thought, going back to your first question regarding
Yeah.
role models, my father and George Steinbrenner, the owner of the Yankees,
Hmm.
were role models. My father, just his upbringing, what he overcame, and how he raised the family. My mother, because my father was going back to school for 2 master's degrees and also working on Rikers Island, she really kept my brother and I grounded, with us doing our homework and just household chores. But I thought I was going to be an accountant or an architect. Those were the two things I aspired to do when I graduated, and thought that's what I wanted to do when I started college.
Mm. And then just to go back, you mentioned that you were a bat boy for the Yankees. How was that experience, and what was the time frame? Around what years?
Oh, it was probably one of the greatest experiences that a young kid can have, and that was during the 1979 and 1980 season. So 1979, tragically, Thurman Munson, our captain, passed away. And even though we had some really great players, Reggie Jackson, of course, Thurman, Willie Randolph, Bucky Dent, Catfish Hunter, Ron Guidry, Goose Gossage,
Mm.
to name a few. We after his passing, the team just didn't make the playoffs that year. My second year in 1980, we got to the American League playoffs, which we lost to the Kansas City Royals in 3 games. But it was a tremendous experience, not only watching how professional athletes dedicate themselves to their craft. Many times we turn on the TV, watch the ball players come running out of the dugout, and that's the game for us. But I was able to see behind the scenes 6-7 hours before a game, watching them taking infield batting practice, in the training room, getting their injuries taken care of, or getting stretched, and how they prepared to be the best at what they do every single day.
Hmm. And now going to college, what did you end up majoring in?
So after high school, I went to a community college, Kingsborough Community College in Brooklyn, where I majored in business administration, and that's what my uh, associate's degree is in.
And then when was there a switch to more law enforcement later on, or because that wasn't really what you were thinking about at that time?
No, and my father growing up would probably tell you, if you asked him back then, that me, Errol, would be the least of his 2 sons. He would think going into law enforcement. But he had encouraged me to take some civil service exams just as a backup. And in 1982, I was called by New York City Transit Police. There were 3 separate police agencies back then, and the New York City Department of Correction, and I chose to follow my father's footsteps.
Hmm. So was that was one of your first jobs coming out of college?
Yes, my first and
Wow.
only job.
Wow. And you went to Rikers Island.
Yes.
What did your initially when you did start that, what was your father thinking, or because was he still working there?
Yes, he was still working when I started the job. And I think, like any parent, he was probably a proud parent. not only following in his footsteps, but hoping to do a very good job as a young officer.
Mm-hmm. And how long did you work there?
So I worked there 22 years on the uniform side. I had to retire in 2004 after a second battle with cancer. So yeah, it's 22 hard years.
And that was through the 80s and 90s?
That's correct. So I started in August of 1982 and completed my career August of 2004.
And were there any particular or challenging or dangerous situations that you might have encountered while working at Rikers Island?
Yes. Back then in the housing areas, there was usually one or two correction officers for maybe 75 to 80 inmates. And so naturally, Rikers Island is a dangerous place, and the staffing was, of course, a little dangerous at times. But I think the most dangerous encounters was when I was assigned to our emergency service unit, where we had to deal with guns. Guns were smuggled inside the facility, so inmates were shooting other inmates, hostage situations, escapes, or any violent uprisings that experienced 10 years in the emergency service unit.
And then also at this time in New York City, there were challenges economically towards the 70s, and then I think there was a rise in crime through the 80s, and I don't know if it peaked in the 90s, but how would you describe New York City through that? I mean, it's a big period of time, but were you living that whole time? Were you living in the Bronx or in a different neighborhood?
No, I lived in the Bronx until 1990 when I then moved out to Suffolk County. But the Bronx back then was, or New York City specifically, was a busy and active place. Great for tourism if you want to see the sights, but then it had its dark side when you looked at crime. It was the height of the crack cocaine epidemic in the late 80s, early 90s. So our jail population exploded to, around 25,000 incarcerated individuals, which was really very difficult. And Mayor Koch at the time implemented a 10% bail reduction. So if you had a $2,500 bail and could pay $250, you would be released because we were overflowing with incarcerated people.
And could you talk a little bit about, because from what I had heard, well, you said you left the job in 2004.
Correct.
But that was from a second diagnosis of cancer. But you had been diagnosed previously before with, was it lymphoma?
So lymphoma was my first diagnosis in 1996. In 2002, I was diagnosed with pancreatic carcinoma. Underwent a arduous surgery, and ultimately wound up retiring August of 2004. And so that was after my second battle with cancer. And then there was a 10-year break where I decided to go back to school, and I received my bachelor's degree, my master's degree, started a second master's in Homeland Security Management. But in the middle of the program, I decided to pursue my doctorate in education, where which I tell a lot of people is the most difficult academic time for me, because in order for me to complete the certificate program in the Homeland Security, I had to be in that school, which is Long Island University, and Dowling College simultaneously for a few months to complete one while starting the other. And so it was during that time frame I had my second battle with cancer, which ultimately forced me to retire in August of 2004.
And how was that experience going through that and persevering through that adversity? And once you felt like you got over one thing and then you went into another thing and just kind of continuing to work through that, how was that mentally working through?
Mentally challenging, but more physically. Physically, I felt like at times my body was giving up. But luckily, outside of a strong faith, I have a great family and some really good friends that really pulled together to, assist my wife at the time and my family to really help us get through that. Lymphoma was chemotherapy and radiation. When you're diagnosed with pancreatic carcinoma, you feel like, this could be it for you. And, I faced another challenge 3 years after my surgery for pancreatic carcinoma because I had a cardiac tamponade. So I had to put a pericardial window in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And when I spoke to the doctors, I think that was the closest I've came to not making it of the 3 serious illnesses that I really had.
Mm-hmm. And then in between this time, were you working as a deputy commissioner of operations within the New York Department of Corrections, or was that was...
No, so 2012, I started working for County Executive Boulogne as his assistant deputy county executive for public safety. And great opportunity to really learn the landscape of Suffolk County outside of being a resident, because you're hearing so many different issues from various constituencies. But in 2014, so actually 10 years, almost 10 years to my original retirement, New York City Department of Corrections asked me to return as the Deputy Commissioner of Operations, where I worked from July of 2014 to January of 2017.
And what did that involve?
I tell a lot of people that role, as I look back, probably prepared me best to be a sheriff because of the leadership position. I had to oversee our applicant investigation section, which we had to hire 3,000 correctional officers a year. But to get to 3,000, we had to probably screen between 10 and 12,000. Mm-hmm. Our intelligence unit, where we had almost 2,500 gang members in the city system, our compliance unit, our emergency management, nutritional services, where we had to provide about 20,000 meals a day, not only to staff, but also to the inmate population. Our environmental, so all environmental issues would come through me. As I mentioned earlier, our compliance division. So, it was a huge, huge responsibility and very long hours, not to mention, with all those responsibilities, you still have to deal with the violent nature of Rikers Island.
Mm. And was there a period, was it in 2017, were you let go at that time? Was that a challenge in period, figuring out what you wanted to do in between that and then deciding on what the opportunity that came about to run for the Suffolk County Sheriff position?
Yes, in late 2016, sometimes you can see the writing on the wall. And I was in disagreement with some of the policies of the de Blasio administration and refused to do some things that I felt would compromise my integrity. So with that, I was asked to ask for my letter of resignation in January of 2017. And yes, when you're a person in your mid-50s and unexpectedly looking for employment can be very challenging. I thought achieved a high degree in my academic standings, and also, as far as a leader position in one of the largest law enforcement agencies, especially penal institutions in the United States. So yes, 2017 was very challenging for me, both emotionally, personally. You had to find a way again, outside of the physical challenges of being ill, to keep going and, push through until unexpectedly in September of 2017, I asked to run for sheriff.
And what did you think of that? Were you ready at that time, thinking I can move into this role, and the outcome at the end and becoming elected?
So I had 53 days when I entered the race to really compete. And my goal was, I didn't think I was going to win. I often tell people my goal was to actually speak to people and hope that someone would either like my resume, like the way I present myself, or like the way I speak. And, I would potentially be hired by someone that may have heard me during a Meet the Candidates or a debate. And little would I even know that the people of Suffolk County would be my employer, because they had faith or had some sort of belief that I would be a good sheriff, and took on the role with a zeal and zest. that I don't think this county's ever seen before.
And initially, when you got into office, what were your initial goals and plans? And was that 2018?
One in 2017, took office January 1st, 2018. And, the first thing was to really understand the culture of the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office and in totality understand the roles and what they did. My initial goal was to really try to bring better training for our staff, better understanding, and then look at the programs that we were offering to the incarcerated individuals. Later learning that 85% of the men and women who are incarcerated are returning back to our community. So if someone is returning back, why not try to do better and help them while they're in our custody? And so we've been able to create a lot of robust programs without taxpayer dollars, I might like to say, that we think assist many of the men and women who are incarcerated. And, it goes back to my dad saying that we rehabilitate men and women who are in jail. I brought that mindset, trying to bring new ideas for rehabilitation, but yet still look at ways to make sure that the staff was safe, that we had good training, good technology, and that they felt comfortable in the job that they do every single day.
And also, I think it was 2019, there was the bail reform.
Mm-hmm.
How was that, and was that challenging that was in your second year, and how that might have been handled from the state level and what they expected of people around New York State, and might have been complicated issue?
Right. Bail reform was enacted January 1st of 2020. A lot of people tend to forget it because we had COVID 2 months later. But, the initial reaction was just, how do we keep our community safe from my perspective? What does the law really entail? And, to give credit to the state legislature, they did actually amended their initial legislation to reflect not all the crimes that they had in their first legislation, where individuals were being released. And that's where I found the biggest challenges. Not the challenges of, people being incarcerated and numbers inside the facilities. What exactly is going to keep our community safe? And, when you look at New York City, where you have an individual commit multiple crimes several times and then be released and then reoffend and released and reoffend, who are we keeping safe and what are we really doing? The community is not safe, nor is the person that's committing these crimes, because clearly they have a penchant to continue to reoffend. But what are we doing as a society to try and help that individual realize the error of their ways and that they can achieve things without committing crimes?
And I think that was something that we did see in 2020. Well, we had the pandemic and then even the social unrest going on, and there was a spike within New York City, and I don't know if you would call it more petty crime, but it felt like that was soft on crime with the bail reform in that respect, that you were saying that if you keep releasing people and they keep, even if it's something as small as going into a CVS store, and now a lot of those stores have had to close in the city, or you have to ask for things at the counter.
Right.
But we haven't, I don't think, experienced that within Suffolk County.
No, we have not experienced that in Suffolk County. And one of the things, even if someone commits a crime, going in, shoplifting, or as we're seeing, organized retail theft is what we're starting to see now, because you see many individuals, masks on, especially in California, running into establishments, stealing merchandise. And so, one, think about the consumers that are in that store. They're traumatized and may never come back to that establishment or start to go online shopping. So there are a lot of people that will lose their jobs. Two, where's the accountability? In most areas in our world, there is accountability for anything, whether it's your job, the commission of a crime. You don't play well on a ball field, so someone else is going to take your place in that position. And so really, we have to hold people accountable for their actions. And that's all I think most of the law enforcement community, and I'm not the spokesperson for everyone, but we just want accountability and really to be brought to the table whenever these legislations are considered, that our voice is requested and listened to as far as our concerns whenever someone is going to act some legislation that may be a little bit more lenient on individuals that are committing crimes.
Yeah, I think that's important because whether it was on local government level, state or federal, I think it's instead of talking to law enforcement or police officers, you want to work with them to come up with a better idea of how to move forward with certain changes. But also, in terms of even through your time as sheriff, there's been a lot of economic challenges, and obviously mentioned through 2020 and coming out of 2021. How do you approach preventing young adults from joining gangs?
So, since I've taken office in January of 2018, I've been in 1 to 2 schools per week, just talking to students. And the central theme before COVID was bullying, opioids, gangs, and vaping. So that's what and I got a real great lesson from a lot of these students, understanding about pill parties, of how these kids would take prescription drugs that weren't theirs, left in a medicine cabinet, and then thrown into this bowl, and then randomly just selecting pills that they would take. Very, very dangerous. So, but after the pandemic, and I was back in the schools, it was anxiety, depression, mental health issues that these young men and women were discussing with me, and realized that, they are really in need of some services that schools probably weren't prepared for, because now all of they're coming back from remote learning, not being in a social environment with their classmates, not interacting physically with their teachers. Some of them doing their schoolwork from bed in pajamas, because it was a remote learning. And so there were many challenges. We have a gang resistance education and training, a great program, which we work with many of the middle schools to help students make correct choices. We want them to avoid the poor choices. We have a community relations unit and other programs that go into the schools, McGruff, the crime dog, to really break down the barriers between law enforcement and those young men and women who may see a 15-second clip on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, which may portray law enforcement in a negative light. And so I think, being active in the community, talking to our youth, and really explaining candidly. We created a student ambassador program in Central Islip High School, where every 2 weeks we go into the school and we talk to the students about a myriad of things, whether it's a subject that the school administration, the students were interested in, or something that we want to present.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the opioids. Have you seen it switching over to with fentanyl use? Have you seen a rise in that? And I think there's also new forms of ways that they're introducing other chemicals into that, and the fentanyl kits don't work well to bring the person back from an overdose. Have you seen that in scenarios throughout the county?
Yes, fentanyl is a very big issue. Actually, our district attorney, Ray Tierney, held a fentanyl summit about a month and a half ago, which I was honored to be a speaker at. But it is very challenging because our young, really all adults that are using drugs, don't know if their drugs are laced with fentanyl, and if they're trying fentanyl, don't realize the potency that could really kill them. We are experiencing this in the jails. Our staff have been trained in Narcan. Unfortunately, sometimes fentanyl or drugs, opioids, do get smuggled into our facilities, and our staff has had to use Narcan to save them, and then of course they're then transferred to a hospital for further treatment. So it is a very big problem that we're having, not only outside in our communities, but inside in our jails.
Mm-hmm. And were there any other recent programs or services that you have implemented within your department or other programs throughout the county?
Well, one thing that we're really proud of is our START Resource Center, and START is an acronym for Sheriff's Transition and Reentry Team. We realize that when individuals are, where are they when they come into our jail? And then as they're released, as I said earlier, 85% are coming back to Suffolk County. What's going on with them? Where are they going? Do they have mental health issues, substance abuse issues? Are they employed? Do they have ID? Do they have birth certificates? And so our staff, we have 7 correction officers. 5 are community correction officers and 2 are correction counselors that work with the individuals the first 7 to 10 days that they're incarcerated. We identify where they're at with an individualized reentry plan that we create, not what we want them to do based on where they are in their lives and what they want to do. And so throughout their incarceration, we have many programs inside the jail: small injury repair, carpentry, landscaping, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, solar, anger management, parenting skills, resume building, so that they can work on those. We also work with Riverhead Library System for other various certificate programs. But more importantly, when they're discharged from either Riverhead or Yaphank, where are they going to and how are they going to sustain themselves? So we make ourselves available for every person that's been in our custody to reach back out to the sheriff's office if they need help with employment, if there's issues with housing, mental health, anything that's going on. And we try to treat the whole problem. So not just the individual that's incarcerated, their loved ones, and also their children. So if you lost your job 6 months after being released from our facility, you can reach back out to our START resource staff, and they will try and help you find other employment so that you do not reoffend, because any one of us can be a victim to someone committing a crime. And I'm proud to say that all the programs that we've created has not cost the taxpayers 1 cent. All of that has been within my own budget.
And also, in terms of the general role as sheriff, what do you find the most challenging aspect of your job?
Talking to adults. Adults can be very challenging. Children have a bigger picture, but when you have different ideologies that people may have regarding certain issues, it becomes a little challenging, especially when they have no experience in the issue. If they, I would say someone that was in law enforcement, generally all agree that everybody's trying to do the best job possible. There's not random abuse. There are men and women, mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, husbands and wives that are just trying to do the best job possible when unfortunate situations may occur. But I do think in my position, and especially at this point in my life, I enjoy helping people. I enjoy the notion of working to keep people safe. I think it's been a passion of mine for almost 42 years now. So it's something I want to continue doing as long as the people of Suffolk County want me here.
Mm-hmm. And I also had just a question about if you could share any, or if you had any insights on the North Fork region, even from Riverhead out to Orient, and anything you might like to convey to the residents out here.
Yes, well, first of all, it's probably one of the most beautiful part of Suffolk County as you drive further and further out east. And what I enjoy most is the family businesses and the fruit stands, and I think that's something that should be commended and admirable, that these type of establishments still exist. Because as you go further west, of course, the bigger organizations are taking over many of the smaller chains. But the beauty, the fresh air, and I think more and more people, because I do spend as much time as I can out on the North and South Fork of Long Island, appreciate not necessarily me, but what the men and women of the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office does. Unlike all of the other jurisdictions, we do cover the entire county.
Mm.
So the Suffolk County Police Department only covers the 5 western towns, and then you have your East End police departments. But the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office, which was created in 1683, as I said before, America is America, covers the entire county, and we're here to protect and serve everyone.
Mm-hmm. And I also had a question. Obviously, it's been a challenging few years, as I've mentioned, through 2019 into 2020. Mm-hmm. How would you address individuals who hold a negative view of law enforcement or police? And do you believe such negativity is unfairly generalized across all officers and departments? Or do you think even with the media portrayal plays a biased role in that?
I do feel at times that the media only shows the negative. And I understand the sensationalism because, as I learned very early on, if it bleeds, it leads. Mm-hmm. I believe is a terminology someone once said to me. I would say, talk to your local law enforcement. If you see something horrific occurring in Minnesota or California or Texas, the chances are that we all disagree with what occurred. I don't think that there's any law enforcement person that I've ever encountered that said what occurred to George Floyd was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. So, to portray the vast majority of law enforcement personnel in that light is really unfair. Myself, someone that's African American that's been in this role or in the law enforcement capacity for, over 4 decades, really understand that there could be some issues at times. But, when more and more law enforcement agencies are holding their staff accountable, there's transparency, there's more visibility, body cameras on businesses, cell phone cameras, and really it protects the law enforcement person, official also, because of a lot of times when they're unjustly accused of something, that those videos will exonerate them. But unfortunately, there's no retribution. So, the officer will go through the emotional trauma of being accused of something. It's on the media because it's only that one part that was shown, but never the entire picture, which could show that the officer did the best job possible under the circumstances that he or she were faced with.
Mm-hmm. And also, at that time, some of the defunding of the police. What were your thoughts on those calls, even in Minneapolis, and where some cities reduced law enforcement funding and saw subsequent increases in crime rates, and then they're still dealing with that till this day?
Many of the communities that call for the defunding and may have actually done it have experienced, high crime, as you mentioned, but more importantly, it's the marginalized communities that are really suffering. Mm-hmm. And so, how do we combat, maybe better training, find better ways to get the type of law enforcement agency that you want. But reducing the funding, reducing the staffing is only going to make your community much more dangerous, where you're going to have crime, you're going to have drugs, violent criminals will take over, gangs will see the vulnerabilities in those communities to recruit members to maybe be part of some sort of criminal enterprise. And so, the outrage that had occurred, especially after George Floyd, was understandable. But what is the method, we can do? You got to remember, Derek Chauvin was an officer that was training new police officers. So why did that occur? Look at the police department and say, how is this person a field training officer that had 3 people that are now going to jail because of his actions, their inactions to stop him, but his action to actually do what he did is something that's very problematic. And so most law enforcement agencies are creating field training officers where they're looking at their staff who are training other staff. Their academies have become a lot more stringent and robust in the type of trainings that they're offering their staff. So I think overall, the law enforcement agencies have to be held accountable. But more importantly, I think those government entities or people that are with the outcry of defunding the police really have to take a step back and think of what they're saying and doing.
And also, I don't think it gets talked about a lot in terms of looking at from police or law enforcement, but how do you prioritize mental health and well-being of officers, especially given the demanding nature of the job?
So in December of 2020, we created the first wellness unit, standalone wellness unit, where we have dedicated staff that have went through training and continue to go through training. And what they do is anytime a staff member has a death in family, serious injury, or any unusual circumstances in their home life, my staff reaches out to them to personally see what we can do to assist them. We also develop an app that the staff or family members can then view what services are available depending on the subject that they're particularly dealing with. We've created a peer support. We have about 40 staff members within the peer support that are our additional supplement to our wellness unit to actually see if officers are going through things. And listen, over my 40 plus year career, I've experienced a lot of different things, from being unemployed, several battles with various health issues, losing my first wife. We were married 29 years. Struggling at times to try and grasp what was going on, with life in general. And so I've seen an evolution of different things that I faced, and I know that any one of the men and women that work in the sheriff's office can potentially go through the same things that I've dealt with. Hopefully not as many, and hopefully none at all. But it's more important that we're able to address them. We also have a therapy dog. One of our deputy sheriffs has a therapy dog assigned to her in the wellness unit, and the therapy dog visits various commands and generally brings a nice smile to everyone's face. And so, we're looking to make sure that our staff knows that they're supporting them. We're getting younger staff members that aren't used to working the long hours, not used to taking orders, maybe have dealt with traumatic incidents during COVID. And so now, and all of them are so used to their mobile devices that they're not used to the interpersonal communication that, we may have been used to when we started our careers.
Mm-hmm. I think even, from that perspective, even with the mental health is very important. And I think even getting the community or the public to understand the profession more deeply, just understanding what the experience is like and how complicated and difficult the job can be. And I mean, obviously there's no excuse for bad behavior, but just moving forward and building trust with law enforcement, I think, is important. And like I said earlier, I think it's coming at it from a way where you're talking with people that might be working in government, but not telling law enforcement how they should be doing their job more so.
Yes, and it becomes, if I told a doctor or an attorney or even a maintenance worker how to do their jobs, they would probably be very offended. And no one, if it's a tragic incident that may occur, no one woke up that day and put on their uniform thinking that this is what was going to happen or this is what they were going to do. Mm-hmm. And so I think, one, the benefit of the doubt. Two, get to know your law enforcement staff. I mean, you'll find that they're probably a great group of men and women that you may want to learn more about, and someone that could really help and dedicated to really putting their life on the line. Because remember, when they respond to a 911 call, they do not know the person that made that call or the place they're going into. And so they're putting their lives on the line for people they don't even know, just like other first responders. And so I feel giving them the benefit of the doubt would be the best way to deal with them.
Mm-hmm. And looking back, continuing working as the Suffolk County Sheriff, what accomplishments are you most proud of through your time?
I think right now connecting to the community is something that I'm very proud of. I think I've tried to reach out to as many people as possible to let them know that the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office is here if they need them. Getting in touch with our young men and women in middle and high schools has been another passion of mine, but also assisting the community and assisting the incarcerated individuals to let them know that there are opportunities for them if they choose to lead a better and law-abiding life, that we will be here to assist them in achieving that goal. And so holistically, from visiting senior centers to schools to taking care of our community in general to make sure that everyone feels safe, and still fighting gangs and crime, and yet those that want to do better and will be returning to our community, assist them so that when you're online in Target, Stop and Shop, or Walmart, who you'll never know if they just got out of Suffolk County Jail, you'll feel comfortable living your life, accordingly.
Mm-hmm. And just looking towards the future, do you have any other goals or plans in mind that you would hope to accomplish further down the line?
Yes, my first goal is to be reelected next year when I run. I think that would be a real crowning moment for me. But there are several projects regarding intelligence gathering and also rehabilitation that my staff works really hard on, and I'm very proud of them, that we want to continue because that intelligence gathering mechanism allows us to be great partners with the Suffolk County Police Department, the District Attorney's Office, and also our East End partners, including state and federal partners. And so that's something that I really want to continue to enhance and increase. Also look at what other ways we can assist incarcerated individuals. We're now looking at what programs in the community might stem someone from offending that need for whatever it is, whether it's mental health, substance abuse, or just poor choices or economic issues, the reason why people are doing what they do. So, continuing to battle that, and can't thank the people of Suffolk County, because we don't have the problems that New York City NYPD has, or New York City Corrections, because many times during the course of my day, especially when I'm in uniform, from young children to older adults come up to me and say thank you for your service.
And lastly, I just ask if there was anything else you'd like to say or discuss that we haven't talked about, or...
No, I think you covered everything. I mean, from my career, my goals, and some social aspects that have occurred. And, I just want to continue to be the best. And that's why my goal is to be, as I tell my staff, the best damn sheriff that this country has ever seen. And I think, my staff has gotten on board with that. And I think as an office, we're trying to show our community that we are not only a good sheriff's office, but sheriff's office that cares not only about our community, but the incarcerated individuals returning back.
Definitely. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on today and share your story. And it was a real honor to have you come in today. And thank you for keeping Suffolk County safe.
Thank you for having me on, sir.
Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 81 with Sheriff Errol Toulon Jr. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.